Okay, this is an introductory pilot lesson. Trying to do something on YouTube for you guys so that we can move things along here during this time of plague. This will be apologetics, and the first thing we're talking about is the problem of evil. If you look in your text, you will have been assigned to read roughly pages 121, and I'd say probably through 126 for this opening lesson. I'm going to assume that you've actually read that, so if you go ahead and look at page 122, chapter 6, the problem of evil, the big problem is it's the actual initial proof of atheism. This is the thing that actually kind of stands on its own, that says atheism is a real thing. We just got done with a chapter, pardon me, where we looked at 18 arguments in favor of the existence of God, and one wager that said you probably need to assume that God really exists. And we looked at a whole bunch of objections to those particular arguments, and we were able to refute those objections. But in none of those cases was that a proof that specifically said that God doesn't exist. The problem of evil is one of actually two possible proofs that says that God does not exist. The other is the argument from naturalism. I'm not going to go into that other than it briefly goes as follows. Pretty much nature works well on its own without interference from God, therefore God doesn't exist. I'm not going to spend time refuting that. If anyone's really interested in pursuing that, you can take a look at a natural philosopher by the name of Alvin Plantinga, and he does a very thorough job of blowing that up. But atheism does rely very heavily on the argument from evil. In fact, most people rely upon the argument from evil, because if you've ever asked yourself the question, why do bad things happen to good people, including, for instance, like what's going on right now with this coronavirus and totally innocent people potentially getting harmed by it, then you've kind of got a feel for what the problem of evil presents with regards to the idea of the existence of God. Continuing on to page 122, and actually I want to move on now to 123. No, sorry, back up. Go back to page 122. Various reasons why this is a problem. Again, it's the apparent proof of atheism. Second paragraph. A second reason is that it's uniquely important because it's universal. Everyone struggles with evil. Okay, no one's free from this. Everyone's gotten punched in the mouth by it. Third, and most importantly, the problem from evil is an intensely practical one. To give a gross example, if this epidemic continues as they say that it's going to, at some point someone you know is going to get sick. And quite possibly someone you know is going to get sick and may even have to be hospitalized. And you're going to ask yourself, why, God, does this happen? You now understand on a basic emotional, visceral level why the problem of evil is a real thing. Now, moving on in the reading, if you take a look at the forms of the problem of evil, there are three forms. It can be claimed that any evil disproves an all-good God. It may be claimed that the amount of evil disproves God, or it might be claimed the unjust distribution of evil disproves God. Now, the first claim is the simplest and the clearest, and overall we're going to be dealing with that, but we're going to save that. So we're going to save the first claim for later, and we're going to look at the second and third claims. The second claim: there's too much evil for a world controlled by a good God. Now, this is a fair question. However, it goes on to say, how much evil is too much? Okay, so the book talks about the example of, so there's 6 million Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. And this is a very bad thing. And a lot of people will say, well, because that sort of thing happened, that God doesn't exist. Okay, but what if the Nazis didn't kill 6 million Jews? What if they killed 600,000 Jews? What if they killed 6,000 Jews? Is that sufficiently bad enough? I mean, the problem with that notion of that there is so much evil, the question starts to beg itself. It's like, well, how much is too much? Because as we start to go through this and we talk about the difference between spiritual evil and physical evil, which is also pain, there is some benefit to pain. So the question of too much evil is kind of easily dispensed with because you can't really define how much is too much. Now, the third claim, and this is where I'm going to have to edit because I'm stuck for a minute. Yeah, see, this is so irritating. This is what happens when you don't review, so hopefully I'll be able to get in to edit this. Yeah, okay, so if you turn to page 124, the second full paragraph, the third form of the problem is the unjust distribution of evil. Sunlight and the plague fall on the just and unjust alike. To this most mysterious aspect of evil, we can reply with two of the most mysterious doctrines in Christianity: original sin and vicarious atonement. Now I'm going to go through these concepts, and then we'll simply stop because typically, with apologetics, there's quite a bit of material, and you probably need some time to digest this. But first of all, if you take a look at the unjust distribution, here's a way to take a look at it. I want you to picture a 3-year-old child who has done nothing wrong, other than maybe trying to put his hand in the cookie jar. For the most part, this kid's totally innocent, right? Gets stricken with what is the lymphoma? Okay, it's a form of blood cancer, and this child has to undergo 3 years of incredibly painful, unpleasant treatments to try and address the cancer, and nothing works, and then finally the child dies after a long, painful illness. Now I want you to compare this to an actual story that I know. Picture a guy, he's about 38 years old. This isn't a person I know, but it was an acquaintance of a friend of mine from years ago. This guy, he's one of these, he's a jerk. I don't know any other way to put it, okay? He's just a jerk. Treats other people poorly, plays the lottery a lot, and he hits the lotto. Proceeds to rub it in everyone's face about how he has money and they don't, and then proceeds to spend it all, at which point a little bit, there's a German term called schadenfreude, where you take delight in someone else's suffering. So there's a little bit of schadenfreude tied into the idea of this guy, hey, he hit the lotto and now he lost everything. How funny. He keeps playing the lotto and he's still a jerk the whole time, and he hits it again. So explain why the innocent little 3-year-old gets hit with lymphoma, and the 38-year-old jerk hits the lottery twice, and on top of this has perfect health. How does this make sense? How does this make sense in any just world that an innocent 3-year-old never is able to go to Europe, and the jerk of the world not only is able to go to Europe or Hawaii or whatever the case may be and tell his boss to go jam it and drive whatever car he wants while still being a jerk to everyone? You guys have said this phrase many times. That ain't fair. And there's some justification to that. I've gotten on you guys about how you say you can't expect things to be fair, you expect things to just, but that still ain't just. There's no justice in that distribution. Why does a kid get hit and the adult gets off scot-free? The concept of vicarious atonement and solidarity play into this. So the first thing I'm going to get into is the notion of solidarity. So, I am in the book talks about this. Now, my last name is Powers. That's an Irish name, but my primary ethnic background actually is German. My mother is a full-blooded German. Her maiden name is Ermentraut, a very, very German name. I'm half German. Both of her parents emigrated from Europe in the early 20th century, so they were both on American soil, I think, by 1910. Now, in the early 1900s, there were two giant world wars, and who was the perceived enemy in both of these wars? That's right, Germany. And then, to boot, the Germans in World War II, as we've already discussed, engaged in the Holocaust. Now, when I studied American history in grade school and in high school, particularly in grade school, and I found out that the Nazis were responsible for perpetrating, Germany was responsible for perpetrating the death of 6 million Jews, I felt guilty. I seriously felt guilty, despite the fact that not only have I never been in Germany, my mother has never been in Germany, even my grandparents, when they emigrated from Europe, they actually emigrated from White Russia. The family actually left Germany in like the 1840s. So we hadn't been in Germany for over 100 years, and yet, because we're ethnic Germans, I felt a little bit guilty. Now, the book uses the example of, imagine the son or grandson of Adolf Hitler. Would that person feel guilty? Obviously. Did the person do anything wrong? No. But they still feel guilty. And therein lies, to some extent, this notion of solidarity. And this is where I start having fun with the idea of we're all brothers and sisters in Jesus. Now, I know you hear that sort of nonsense coming out of my mouth, and it sounds completely ridiculous. However, there's actually a kernel of truth to it. I'll give you two possible illustrations of why. One, the largest living organism is actually not the blue whale or a giant sequoia tree in Yosemite National Park. Depending on who you talk to, it's either a colony of mushrooms or, and this is a more popular notion, it is a colony, I believe, of aspen trees that are spread in southern Colorado and Utah. Now, if you were to walk through this forest of trees, you'd assume they're all separate trees. I mean, to walk through them, you'd see separate tree trunks, right? But they're all sharing one unified root structure. It's technically one organism. Yet to walk through it, you see separate trees. So the unification is there, but you actually can't see it. Now, I'll give an illustration that involves actual humanity. What do you guys know from biology? See, and this is why I hate YouTube videos, because you can't have any interaction. All right, when I ask people what's the main thing you remember from biology when you're in elementary school, most people say mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Good, brilliant, and that's what I want to talk about. You know, DNA, it's that basic genetic mark that we have in every single cell. Well, mitochondria has its own DNA. It's actually slightly unique. And mitochondrial DNA, we actually can trace backward. If we take DNA samples from you and your mother and simply put them through, I don't know if they do this via microscope or whether they do it via chemical reagents, but they are able to tell which was you and which came from your mother. Now, they can't do this with dads. So mitochondrial DNA is what is called matrilineal. You're able to trace your maternal ancestors back through mitochondria. And they've taken mitochondrial DNA samples from everyone all over the world. And they have discovered that there's a commonality amongst matrilineal DNA, meaning we all have a common mother. All of us descend from a single human female. You can go ahead and call her Eve if you like. You may not be wrong. Biologically speaking, in terms of science, no one is ever going to make that claim. But we all come from a common maternal ancestor, meaning we really are all cousins. We're all brothers and sisters in Jesus. Genetically speaking, technically, we are all related. And it is from that relation that we're able to justify how the 3-year-old can suffer while the 38-year-old potentially gets off scot-free. But to be perfectly honest, having covered all that material, I'm tired of talking, so we're going to stop there. I'm going to edit this up a little bit, and then it will be presented to you whenever we get through this material, which is perhaps next week. See you next time.